Israel knows what it is fighting for, and it knows that it's fighting not just for its survival, but the survival of all of us.
Israel is making people more and more increasingly militant. So what is happening at the moment
Israel's making people more militant.
Is not working.
Do you think that Hamas is making people more militant or not?
Well, it's a catch-22.
Oh, I see.
You don't honestly think they're all pro-Hamas, these people?
I think that anyone who, for instance, chants things like from the river to the sea is, in fact, criminally ignorant.
So we're here with one of my favorite authors, one of my favorite people, Douglas Murray.
אין ישראלי שלא מכיר את דגלאס מרי, העיתונאי הבריטי שזכה למוניטין עולמי והערכה על העמדות והתחזיות שלו לאורך השנים. מרי הוא בין הראשונים שדיברו על נפילתה של אירופה, שחזרו את ההתנגשות עם האסלאם ולא חששו גם לפני השבעה באוקטובר לעמוד לצידה של ישראל.
You're talking about crossing points. And not only have you never been to a crossing point in either Egypt or in Israel, but you've never even been to the region.
בימים אלו יוצא לאור ספרו החדש על דמוקרטיה וכיתות מוות, ישראל ועתיד הציביליזציה. הספר נכתב אחרי טבח השבעה באוקטובר. ניצלנו את ההזדמנות כדי לשמוע ממנו על המלחמה של ישראל. Hello Douglas Murray, thank you for joining us.
It's a great pleasure to be with you.
In your new book, you are describing the most horrific stories from the massacre of October 7. For us, the Israeli, it's easy to understand why. We want the world to know. But how the foreign reader accept it?
That's a very good question. I think that the stories of October the 7th itself are both known about and also just not known about enough. There are so many extraordinary stories from the day, obviously stories of the horror, but also stories of the heroism of individual Israelis who did remarkable things that day, which I also wanted to bring out. I think that the wider world is pretty ignorant, actually, of the details of the day. And it's something I mention in the book, a sort of extraordinary thing that I started to become aware of almost immediately after the news of the massacre began, which was that much of the world was going to move straight on from what had happened onto the story of what Israel's response would be. And I mention in the book that by the 8th of October, international media like the BBC were saying, what will Israel's revenge be, essentially? In the book, you also mention or you describe how the Israelis which were victims on that day, very fast became the abuser in the eyes of the world. Yes, it seems to be, for reasons I go into in the book, it seems to be the case that the Israeli people, perhaps unique of all publics in the world, after being the victims of terrorism, turn into being victimized a second time. First of all, by being the victims of the jihadists of Hamas, and then of the world blaming them. Why is a question I go into a lot, is why is it that Israelis, even ones who are direct victims of terror, need to be treated by much of the world, not all of it, but by much of the world, as if they, the victims, are the perpetrators or the would-be perpetrators. This is particularly strange because we've lived through an era in the West where we talk about victim blaming as being one of the worst things you can do. And yet in the case of Israelis, the victims of this, they're repeatedly victim blamed.
So what is different when it comes to Israelis?
I think that there is a belief that the Israelis have done something uniquely wrong that makes them uniquely unsympathetic or unsuitable for an expression of basic human empathy. And obviously some of the people who push that are radicals, jihadists, Islamists, and much more. But I think that the wider explanation is the number of people in the wider West, in America and Britain and elsewhere, who really have been taught in American college campuses that Israel is a colonial power, that it is a white supremacist country, that it is genociding. Don't forget all the claims of genocide that we've heard in recent weeks. people were claiming there was a genocide in Gaza before October the 7th.
Of course.
But all of these claims have been made, and they have been absorbed and believed by large numbers of people in the wider West.
Is it Israel or is it Jews and the Jewish state?
Well, it's the same thing, isn't it? It is so convenient for people who would love to be openly anti-Semitic that they get to accuse Israel of everything. And if you say you seem to have a rather natural preoccupation with the world's one Jewish state, they think that they're not exposing themselves. Of course they are. Of course they are. And they've come into much clearer sight in the last 2 years.
The government of Spain will approve the official recognition of Palestine as a state.
Do you see this policy or this behavior also in the last days, what we see as the recognition of some Western countries in a Palestinian state?
Oh, yes. I mean, there are many people around the world who do not have a state and whose right, justification, and much more to have a state is powerful. I think, for instance, of the Kurdish people, who have been extraordinary allies of the West in many campaigns, not least the campaign against ISIS. No Western city has been pulled to a halt and had large protests of people demanding the right of the Kurds to have a state, and no Western governments make a unilateral declaration of Kurdish statehood. These are all countries that on October the 7th and 8th, 2023, said that they would stand with Israel. In under 2 years, they've decided to completely subvert their relationship with Israel, not do what they said they would do, which was to do everything they could to release the hostages and much more, but decided to declare a unilateral declaration of Palestinian state. It's pure gesture politics, of course, and as Marco Rubio said, in part, that's because of the large number of Muslim immigrants who have come into each of these countries. If you observe the protests in any of these Western countries against Israel, they are dominated by Muslim immigrants or the children of Muslim immigrants. But there's a second thing, of course, as well, which is those people I just referred to, who I go into in the book and try to explain, which is the Western people, not Muslim, but who have fallen into the religion of Palestinianism. They even dress in their sort of Palestinian chic, you know. They don kaffirs and say things like Palestine and things like that, thinking that they are so authentic. These are lost souls in the West who have basically discovered a new religion, and the religion is Palestinianism.
But how do you explain the gap between the leadership and the people?
This noisy minority is a threat, especially to leaders on the political left, like Starmer, like Mark Carney in Canada and Albanese in Australia. This is an electoral threat to some of them. Don't forget that, for instance, in Britain, Keir Starmer's Labour Party had MPs who stood as so-called Gaza independents and won a handful of seats at the last election. Can you imagine anything more ridiculous than somebody in Britain standing as a Gaza independent? What the hell's it got to do with them? What's Gaza to them? Well, this is communitarian politicking. This is a big threat. This is not a threat, I think, to Israel. It's a threat to the countries that behave in that way because, of course, among other things, gives out the very strong message that you're easy to manipulate and easy to intimidate. And there will be consequences in each of these Western countries for that lesson down the road.
החודש התקיימה הפגנה חסרת תקדים בבריטניה במחאה על ההגירה והאסלאם הקיצוני. מעניין לשאול את מרי, האם זו תחילתה של התפכחות, ומה הסיכוי של אירופה להתגבר על המצב ולהביא דליה?
Many people, I think, are fed up of the Palestinianist religion. They're fed up of seeing their cities defaced by Palestinian flags whilst being told that flying their own national flag is racist. I mean, literally in recent weeks, you mentioned the protests in London last weekend, the weekend before last, where more than 100,000 patriots came out and made their voices heard. The people who have criticized them and who indeed have criticized British people for flying the British flag more and more in recent weeks, are the same people who believe that British streets should be covered in Palestinian flags. And I think it's inevitable that whilst being very concerned about the growth of this just anti-Israelism from, as I say, Muslims and also from just sort of lost souls, I think it's also necessary to notice that the majority of the public are unlikely to adore that movement. It has overreached massively. And I think a lot of people, there was a group of football supporters the other week in Belfast in Northern Ireland. It may not be symptomatic, but it was pleasing. Who, when they saw these people marching past with their Palestinian flags and so on, told them let us say, in football terrorist terms, where they could shove their Palestine.
Stick your Palestine! Stick your Palestine up your hole!
There is a saying of people that believe that Israel is fighting the war of the Western world. Do you believe in it?
Very much so. Look at any protest of in the West of people who are supportive of the Jewish state. And there are protests like that. If they happen in London or Canada or wherever, people will fly the flag of Israel and they'll fly the flag of the country they're in. I was in Canada the other week addressing a meeting of Jews and Christians who are pro-Israel. And we sang Hatikva and O Canada. Notice that on any anti-Israel demonstration anywhere in the West, you will see Palestinian flags, you might see Hamas flags and Hezbollah flags. You will not see a flag proudly flown of the country that protest is in. In fact, in, for instance, America, where I'm sitting at the moment, if there's a Palestinianist protest, it'll be guaranteed that the only American flag present will be the one that they're burning. This tells, or should tell, the West everything about the real meaning of this conflict. And in the face of that, you can do what Starmer and Carney and co have done. You can try to feed the crocodile, to cite a famous reference about appeasement. You can try to feed the crocodile, but it will eat you next. And that's why I hope that more and more people, as I say in this book, realize that the existential threat that faces Israel is also down the road and not far down the road, an existential threat that threatens all other Western democracies. I would like to see those democracies wake up to that threat.
Can you show me an example of Jews living peacefully under Islamic rule?
Most definitely.
Where?
When the Hamas had Israeli captives. Have you seen the
Israeli captives they killed?
Douglas, we were all shocked from the murder of Charlie Kirk. I have to ask you, are you afraid?
No, I'm not. No. I don't think there's anything that anyone can really do in the face of the sort of people who would shoot you for speaking. I think there unfortunately have always been people who think that violence is better than democratic politics, free discussion, and much more. But no, I think all that any of us can do is use our voices if we have, and if we have a platform, use our platforms to keep speaking the truth as we see it. That's what Charlie did till his dying breath. And I think that's what one lesson to take from it is that more people should use their voice and their platform to express the truth as you see it. It would be the greatest possible rejection of the people of violence.
The Palestinian Authority has also now committed to pay salaries to the fighters and the terrorists of Hamas from October the 7th and their families. So tell me, please, Piers, or Mr. Barghouti, where is the good negotiating partner on the Palestinian side here exactly?
How would you summarize the last 2 years as you've seen them?
Well, I didn't just visit Israel. I lived in Israel for most of the period since October 7th. I sometimes joke to friends, maybe I've become a little bit Israeli. There's a debate about what that means, of course. But
I think the Israelis will be happy.
I'm less good at queuing than I used to be. But the resilience of Israelis and the bravery of so many Israelis is something that I've been in awe of. I also mean in a moral sense. I refer to the Hamas and so on as death cults because they are. and I've tried to popularize the use of that term to describe them. But I was deeply moved the other week when the Iran strikes were happening. And, you know, the Iranian government was sending ballistic missiles into Israel, and so many Israelis. They followed government regulations, obviously, went to the shelters. Very important they did. But they were not fearful. It's not the same thing as not being worried, not being concerned. But I was particularly moved by a video that a friend sent me from a bomb shelter that she was in Tel Aviv. And there were all of these young people, and there was a group of girls, and they were dancing and singing. And I said to her, you know, the world's biggest death cult has just met the world's greatest life cult. And I think the life cult will win.
Douglas Murray, thank you very much.
Thank you.
They may come for the Zionists. Very well. I am a Zionist. They may keep coming for the Israelis. Very well. I'm an Israeli. They may come continuously for the Jews. Very well. I'm a Jew. I'm Israel Kai.